You find yourself at a profound juncture in this very instant. And I don't mean that in the cliché sense of facing a major life transition or feeling that familiar, unsettling anxiety of impending change. I am not speaking in metaphors or poetic abstractions. The truth is, there is a definitive point in human awareness when you reach the absolute boundary of your current self, pausing just before stepping into the next iteration. It is that precise second when the world you've grown accustomed to starts revealing its hidden cracks. The narrative you've built regarding who you are and your potential begins to expose itself as exactly that, just a narrative. It isn't necessarily a false or broken story, but it simply ceases to be the entire truth. You are inhabiting that exact juncture right now. And what you are on the verge of realizing is that the peculiar sensations you've been battling are not signs of a chaotic mind. That lingering feeling of being caught between different worlds, those vivid dreams that cling to you long after waking, that magnetic draw toward an unknown destiny, and your sudden refusal to walk the logical, expected path, the bizarre conviction that you are living multiple lives at once, is not a symptom of confusion. It is the tangible friction of parallel timelines intersecting within your current existence. And this collision is occurring within you as we speak. As you process these words, an energetic portal has swung wide open within your consciousness. It unlocked simply because your personal vibration finally matched the resonance needed to perceive it. It didn't happen prematurely, and it didn't happen for anyone else, it happened for you. This portal isn't some philosophical symbol for personal growth. It is a literal, physical border separating two distinct states of existence. It is the bridge between the version of you who believed only one linear path existed and the version of you who is about to consciously experience that alternate realities aren't happening in some distant universe. They are right here. They are aggressively pushing against the fragile walls of your everyday life. They have, in fact, been steering you since you were born. You simply lacked the vocabulary to describe the phenomena. Today, you are given the vocabulary, and that knowledge alters the entire game. Because once you comprehend the mechanics behind this, once you grasp the actual physics of how parallel paths collide, weave together, and penetrate the mental barriers your nervous system has worked so hard to maintain, you can never go back to ignorance. You will never again dismiss your yearning for an unlived life as mere daydreaming. You won't brush off moments of intense intuition about the future as simple imagination. You will stop viewing your divided inner self as an emotional flaw that requires fixing. It isn't a flaw, it is a doorway, and that doorway is completely unlatched. So, let us step through it. Before we can dive into the mechanics of multiple timelines, we must first redefine our concept of reality not through philosophy, but through hard physics. The framework most individuals rely on, the one that paints parallel paths as mere sci-fi tropes, doesn't align with what quantum science actually proves. That old framework is archaic. It served its purpose for basic survival. But at the precipice you now stand on, it falls entirely short. In traditional Newtonian physics, the rules governing what our ordinary senses can plainly see and touch reality is fixed, singular, and predictable. Objects sit in one distinct location. A particle travels at a specific speed. Systems hold a single, solid state. Give a scientist enough data, and the future is a simple mathematical equation calculated from the present. Reality is viewed as a solitary thread, moving continuously in a single direction. This is the physics of the world as it appears. And for mundane tasks and everyday objects, it suffices. However, it is fundamentally incorrect regarding the true fabric of reality. If we zoom into the quantum realm, the foundational field from which all physical matter is born, the rules become radically different. Before it is measured or observed, a quantum entity does not sit in a singular, defined state. It exists in what scientists label as superposition. This is a condition where every single potential state the system could take is happening simultaneously. These aren't just theoretical options waiting to be selected from a menu. They aren't mere mathematical probabilities waiting to collapse when someone decides to look. It is a concrete physical reality where all possibilities live side by side. The particle isn't hiding in position A or position B waiting to be discovered. It is tangibly occupying both positions at the exact same time. Both locations are real. Both are an active part of what that system is in that very millisecond. This isn't just a wild interpretation. It is the literal translation of quantum mechanics. The wave function, the core equation predicting how quantum systems behave, encapsulates all potential realities of a system concurrently, balanced by their probability. It does not represent our human ignorance about which state the particle is in. It describes the actual, multifaceted nature of the system itself. In truth, the system occupies every single one of those conditions concurrently. But the moment a measurement takes place, when classical instruments interact with quantum phenomena, or when human awareness collides with the quantum field, a dramatic shift occurs. A single, distinct result solidifies into the tangible reality perceived by the observer. Suddenly, the particle is locked into either position A or position B. The superposition seems to collapse into a definite state. Yet, this brings us to a profound mystery that has fractured the scientific community for almost 100 years. It remains fiercely debated in academic journals, symposiums, and midnight discussions. Where do the unchosen states go? The conventional explanation, the one spoon-fed in university lectures, printed in mainstream science literature, and accepted as cultural gospel, is that they simply cease to exist. We are told that observing a phenomenon annihilates every alternate possibility. The narrative claims the wave function collapses. All other potential paths evaporate, and existence funnels down into one solitary timeline. End of story. However, there is a massive secret hidden behind that textbook answer. It isn't backed by the math. In the actual calculations, the wave function never collapses. The Schrödinger equation, which dictates the evolution of quantum systems, is flawlessly unbroken and entirely deterministic. It elegantly maps out every single possibility moving forward side by side. You will not find a mathematical variable that deletes unobserved outcomes. The equation neither predicts nor demands a collapse. This collapse concept was artificially grafted onto the theory. It wasn't born from mathematical necessity. It was shoehorned in because it mirrored human perception. We only see one result, so we assume only one exists. Scientists concluded that the invisible possibilities vanished simply because they were out of sight. Yet, failing to perceive something does not mean it has been erased from reality. Enter physicist Hugh Everett in 1957. He posed a radical question. What if we trusted the pure math? What if we tracked the Schrödinger equation strictly through the point of measurement, refusing to artificially inject a collapse just to comfort our human biases? His conclusion was earth-shattering. At the exact second of observation, all realities persist. Not just the one we see, every single one. The version of you witnessing outcome A and the version witnessing outcome B both endure. Both timelines march forward indefinitely. Crucially, each observer feels completely convinced that they are the only real one living in the true reality. From within a specific timeline, parallel branches are completely invisible. They undergo a process called decoherence, becoming so intricately bound to their specific environments that they can no longer interact. They diverge into parallel streams of consciousness, yet they are fundamentally present. They continuously progress, branching out at every single instance of measurement or observation. Every time a superposition seems to settle into a solid state for you, a new branch is born. This framework is known as the many worlds interpretation. It is not pseudoscience, and it is not mere guesswork. It is the logical endgame of applying science's most accurate predictive model with absolute honesty, stripping away human-made assumptions. A rapidly expanding roster of today's most elite, mathematically rigorous physicists embrace this as the truest depiction of our universe. Parallel realities are not just a trendy metaphor hijacked to validate spiritual concepts. They are an inescapable mathematical reality of the quantum realm. Once you discard the arrogant assumption that your limited perception dictates the entirety of existence, This is the exact point where abstract physics transforms into the very doorway you are standing before. The crucial issue isn't merely proving that parallel worlds exist. It's understanding the profound implications of them bleeding into each other right now, in your current lived experience. This overlapping is the root cause of that heavy, unnameable tension you felt stretching between two versions of yourself, a phantom weight you may have carried for weeks, months, or even years without a proper label. Overlap is not a loose term. It is an exact scientific descriptor. It maps out how quantum states that haven't entirely split apart still echo and influence one another across diverging timelines. Decoherence, that mechanism splitting realities into separate streams, does not happen in a flash. It isn't a solid brick wall. It is a fading gradient. It is a progressive entanglement with the surrounding environment until the timelines can no longer cross wires. While this separation seems instantaneous when observing a solitary microscopic particle, for a solitary atom, this timeline separation happens quicker than our most advanced tools can track. For a molecule, it remains practically immediate. However, human awareness does not function at this microscopic level where reality divergence is a split-second event. Your mind is vastly more intricate than a lone particle. It acts as a multidimensional network, deeply woven into a tapestry of past events, human connections, and temporal patterns. When you operate at this macro level, especially when facing a legitimate crossroads where two potential futures stand equally vivid and neither has fully materialized, the separation process drags out. During these pivotal transitions, the walls dividing parallel lives become remarkably porous, far less rigid than your daily routines would imply. Let me be clear. This isn't poetic imagery. This is the literal scientific consequence of applying quantum mechanics to everyday human existence. For you, hovering at this current doorway, it means those periods where your life felt entirely paused in midair were profoundly significant. Those times when two futures felt incredibly tangible, when your ultimate direction was completely obscured, and you felt strangely split into multiple identities, those weren't bouts of mental fog. They were not personal failings or a lack of focus. They were moments of authentic, macroscopic superposition. Two distinct realities coexisted simultaneously. They were intersecting not as a psychological illusion, but as a physical law. Furthermore, your personal input during these windows matters immensely. The caliber of your focus, the intentionality of your consciousness, and your absolute presence in observing the quantum field actively dictate how this superposition ultimately settles. You are far from a helpless bystander watching life unfold around you. You are the exact epicenter where parallel universes are crashing together today. The portal is wide open, and our journey is only just beginning. If these concepts are striking a chord with you, please take a quick moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I will be releasing more deep dives like this, and you won't want to miss them. Now, let's explore the actual, physical sensation of intersecting timelines. The truth is, you've already experienced this. It's been happening for far longer than you'd suspect, but you lack the mental blueprint to properly identify it. By design, your nervous system aggressively blocks out the perception of parallel worlds. This isn't a defect. It is a vital evolutionary shield, the biological filter that constructs your neat, singular reality, operates with ruthless efficiency. If it failed, the naked exposure to infinite, bleeding possibilities would absolutely break your mind. Trying to function normally while consciously perceiving a massive quantum superposition would be paralyzing. You wouldn't be able to make a single choice or take a single step, because every conceivable option would feel incredibly authentic and present all at once. To adapt, your brain trained itself to treat the immediate foreground as the totality of existence. It highlights one single branch as truth and shoves the rest into the shadows. It engineers a safe, predictable, and manageable world by muting the chaotic quantum sea underneath. Yet, that suppressed data doesn't just vanish. Just because your biology dismisses it as background static doesn't mean it ceases to be real. It remains deeply embedded in the hidden link between your mind and the universal field. It lingers just out of sight, and specific mental states can temporarily tune into this hidden frequency. Profound quiet is one of those triggers, not a forced artificial meditation, but that organic peace that washes over you when you finally abandon overthinking and your mind naturally falls silent. In that pure quiet, your biological filter drops its guard. For a fleeting second, the underlying quantum fabric becomes visible through your own awareness. True creative flow achieves the same result. When you become so deeply immersed in a project that the wall between creator and creation dissolves, you tap into this. Painters, composers, and authors are intimately familiar with this zone. The inspiration seems to pour in from an external source, or perhaps from a version of yourself unbound by normal time. This isn't mystical thinking. It is simply your nervous system's filter widening, allowing a broader spectrum of reality to bleed into your consciousness. The fragile borderland between slumber and wakefulness also opens this door. During the hypnagogic phase, those twilight minutes right as you drift off or slowly wake up, your brain's strict loyalty to a single timeline wavers. Bizarre images flood in, feeling completely alien to your current life. You suddenly grasp insights you could never reach while fully awake. That isn't your imagination playing tricks on you. That is the multiverse briefly coming into focus. Surprisingly, profound sorrow does this too, albeit in a brutal fashion. Severe grief shatters your nervous system's absolute confidence in what is real. It violently confronts you with the truth that your solid, permanent life was deeply fragile. It exposes the painful reality that your current world was merely one vulnerable branch among millions, never the entirety of existence. Through that brutal stripping away of illusion, in that crushing realization of life's fragility, your mental barricades occasionally drop just enough to let parallel realities bleed through. Every single one of these conditions shares a common thread, a momentary suspension of your brain's desperate grip on a one-track reality, and within that relaxed grip, you've actually been sensing the quantum overlap. You've perceived this intersection as a magnetic drag toward a reality that hasn't physically materialized yet. But this isn't mere desire. Desire stems from a feeling of emptiness or absence. This phenomenon is distinct. It is profound recognition. It's an innate understanding that a specific outcome already exists within the universal fabric, even if your physical eyes can't see it yet. The parallel branch where that alternate destiny is actively playing out is heavily leaning against the walls of your present world. You interpret this friction as an irrational intuition, an absolute confidence that precedes any logical proof. That exact sensation is the timeline overlap. You've also felt this as a bizarre aversion to perfectly reasonable choices. You encounter an opportunity that aligns perfectly on paper, ticks all the right boxes, and earns everyone's applause. Yet, deep down, it feels fundamentally incorrect in a way you can't articulate. It isn't morally bad, it simply isn't yours. It feels incorrect because, beneath your conscious logic, your soul already maps out where that trajectory leads. This, too, is the quantum intersection. The underlying field is bypassing your normal senses to warn you that the timeline this logical choice creates has already settled into an outcome that your current self simply cannot perceive yet. Furthermore, you experience this overlap as a persistent haunting that a very specific destiny belongs to you. This isn't blind ambition or a career goal. It behaves much more like a memory. It is a striking familiarity with a path you haven't walked yet. It doesn't present itself as a target to hit, but as an undeniable truth. You find yourself thinking, "This is my true calling. This is where I belong." You didn't invent this desire. You simply remembered it. This is your awareness vibrating at a high enough frequency to touch a potential reality before it physically manifests. Finally, you've endured this as a sensation of being fractured, a strange conviction that you embody multiple identities concurrently. It feels as though different iterations of yourself are wrestling within the confines of a single body and a single timeline. One avatar knows precisely its purpose and destination. The other is trapped in outdated narratives, relying on an obsolete map. That grating friction between these two coexisting states, that is literal quantum superposition. That is the collision of worlds. That is the exact physiological experience of standing at a gateway where two parallel lives are intensely active, waiting for a final resolution. You have endured this collision for years, but now you have a name for it, and that awareness radically transforms how you will navigate it. A question for you. Let's take a quick breather so I can ask you a question. Have you ever experienced a specific second where you instinctively knew without a shred of physical proof that you had passed a point of no return? A distinct shift where your old existence suddenly felt like a house you had just locked the door to, and you were now standing on the outside? Drop your experience in the comments below. Keep it to one raw, unedited sentence. I truly want to read what that threshold felt like for you. Consider the journey of a woman we'll call Mara. She dedicated 11 years to constructing a life she deeply valued. It wasn't just a career. She had engineered a massive framework of purpose around a very specific identity. Her life was incredibly logical. Every decision had a clear rationale that perfectly connected to her past actions. Yet, during a completely average year, an invisible pivot happened. It wasn't a loud disruption. It wasn't born from tragedy. There was no explosive event she could circle on a calendar and say, that was the catalyst. Instead, the underlying hum of her daily existence just changed its pitch. It felt as though a melody she had listened to for a decade was suddenly playing a half step out of tune. It wasn't glaringly awful. It just wasn't harmonious anymore. Suddenly, she couldn't ignore the subtle inconsistencies she used to easily brush aside. The stark contrast between her spoken desires and her actual instinctual actions became glaring. The polished narrative she sold to her peers completely mismatched her internal, daily reality. Routine conversations began leaving her with a strange, hollow echo she had never felt before. Meanwhile, fleeting, random occurrences, the specific slant of the sun at dusk, a profound quietness, or the trivial side projects she tinkered with during her free time made her feel exponentially more authentic than the primary focus of her actual career. She mistakenly assumed she was plummeting into a midlife crisis. She was convinced she was broken. She interpreted that heavy, suspended feeling of being stretched between two identities as a psychological defect that required an immediate cure. She invested a massive amount of energy attempting to repair the situation. She doubled down on the life she had painstakingly constructed, desperate to inject fresh enthusiasm into her current circumstances. She repeatedly told herself that this magnetic pull toward a different existence was merely a case of the grass is always greener. She tried to dismiss it as a restless ego, chronically unsatisfied with its own success. Basically, she did everything in her power to force the sensation to disappear, but it wouldn't fade, because it wasn't an illness to be cured. It was pure data. It was the universal field directly communicating with her, bypassing the mental blockers her brain had utilized for over a decade. It was signaling that a parallel iteration of her life had been steadily maturing in the background. A truer, more authentic version of herself had been quietly growing alongside the persona she was acting out daily. The friction, the heavy pressure of that alternate timeline pushing against her current reality had finally become too intense for her biological filters to block out. What she had initially diagnosed as a mental breakdown was, in fact, the doorway swinging open. The agonizing split personality she viewed as a massive problem was simply her quantum superposition coming into focus. That relentless craving for an undefined future was the parallel timeline aggressively bleeding into her present world. And here is the crucial takeaway from Mara's journey that directly applies to your exact situation today. The very second she stopped trying to cure the sensation and started trying to decode it, the moment she transitioned from asking, "Why am I broken?" to asking, "What is the universe trying to reveal to me?" Her entire world transformed. It wasn't a sudden cinematic explosion. To an outsider, Her life probably looked exactly the same for a long while. But internally, the nature of her superposition fundamentally altered. The exhausting tug-of-war between her two identities ceased being a burden and transformed into a compass. She finally learned to untangle the different voices in her head. She could isolate that pure, resonant pull toward her alternate timeline, a sensation that felt remarkably like remembering a profound truth, and separate it from the chaotic noise of fear, habitual comfort, and the stubborn ego of her past identity. She began executing decisions that made absolutely no logical sense to her peers, yet felt incredibly harmonious to her soul. She felt aligned. She felt as though she was stepping into her genuine self, rather than shrinking away from it. And slowly, that parallel branch, the very timeline that had been haunting the edges of her awareness, calling out to her without a name, began solidifying into her tangible, everyday reality. This didn't happen because she aggressively forced it. It wasn't the result of meticulous planning or brute willpower. It materialized because she became an incredibly pure observer of the quantum field's signals. She paid such close attention that the wall separating what is from what could be simply dissolved in the direction she was focusing on. Mara's experience is not an outlier. It is the exact blueprint of crossing a quantum threshold. It is the universal template for what happens when a human consciousness hits the absolute limit of its current iteration, and the parallel overlap becomes impossible to ignore. The issue isn't whether you find yourself in Mara's shoes right now. You absolutely do. The real issue is, will you continue trying to medicate the feeling, or are you finally ready to translate it? The portal is open. Now, let's address the reality of your fractured state. The title you clicked on to watch this video, the stark warning that you are split, was not a dramatic clickbait tactic. It is a literal, scientific diagnosis of your current existence. You are internally divided, but not in a sick, pathological way. It isn't a mental flaw that needs a therapist's intervention. You are split in the exact same manner that every evolving consciousness is fractured at a major juncture. You are split in the same way a quantum particle exists in multiple locations during superposition. Any entity transitioning from one plane of reality to another must, by law, temporarily occupy both spaces simultaneously. One half of you is deeply entrenched in your old paradigm. It operates using outdated rules, navigates with a useless map, and views the world through a lens you've outgrown. This half knows exactly how to survive in your current environment. It has constructed a solid ego there. It maintains friendships, routines, and behaviors perfectly tuned to the world you currently inhabit. This older version of you is valid. It isn't evil, and it certainly isn't the villain in your story of growth. In fact, you owe it gratitude. It is the exact vehicle that safely delivered you to this very gateway. However, it is utterly incapable of walking through the portal. Why? Because the other half of you, the version already thriving on the other side, the one aggressively pushing against the fabric of your current reality, the one you sense as an unnameable longing, operates on an entirely different operating system. It perceives the universe differently. It handles risk and the unknown with a different grace. It comprehends its own existence in a totally new light. And that massive void between these two identities, that grating, exhausting friction of trying to inhabit two realities at the exact same time, that is the quantum superposition you are trapped inside right now. This is precisely why standing at life's ultimate crossroads feels so maddening. You aren't losing your mind. You are, quite literally, existing in two states at once. Two distinct iterations of who you are currently exist as absolute truth. Two completely different paradigms for interpreting your existence are running at the exact same time. Two distinct lenses of perception, two opposing moral compasses, and two entirely different ways of reacting to the exact same outside events are occupying your mind at once. This is not mental chaos. This is quantum superposition in action. The goal here is not figuring out how to end this phase quickly. Your objective isn't to violently force the wave function to collapse, aggressively picking one identity and suffocating the other. You shouldn't be trying to flee the awkwardness of this limbo just to find solid ground as fast as you can. Instead, the real challenge is learning how to remain deeply present within this superposition so you can actively steer how it eventually settles. Quantum physics reveals a vital truth about these moments of overlap. The condition of the observer is critical, and I don't mean that in some fluffy self-help sense, but as a hard, physical law. The precise state of the measuring tool, which is your own consciousness, plays a direct role in what materializes into reality. You don't achieve this by aggressively forcing a specific outcome to happen through sheer willpower. You do it by achieving a specific frequency of internal alignment. It is this internal coherence that invites the correct timeline branch to permanently anchor itself. Therefore, maintaining high-quality awareness at this precipice isn't just a nice bonus. It isn't an optional meditative hobby for the spiritually inclined. It is the exact mechanical lever you pull to determine which version of your destiny solidifies into fact. If you tackle your current state of overlap using your outdated mindset, clinging to the old reality, viewing everything through your past narratives, and navigating this new borderland with an obsolete map, you will find the crossing brutal. The transition will drag on, and your arrival into the new phase will be agonizing and incomplete. Conversely, if you tackle it from the upgraded paradigm, embodying the self that has already crossed over, vibrating with the clarity of the other side, and syncing with the timeline currently knocking on your door, the outcome radically shifts. The transition becomes seamless. The identity that ultimately locks into place is a much purer expression of who you genuinely are. Being divided isn't your enemy. That division is the portal itself, and you are right on its doorstep. So, let's break down exactly what lies on either side. You can only step through this portal when you have absolute clarity on what you are shedding and what you are stepping into. This isn't about judging the old life as toxic and the new life as perfect. It is about looking at the raw, honest facts of what both realities hold. On your current side of the boundary within the life you've been living, reality is viewed as a solitary track. Truth is defined strictly by what you can see, measure, and historically prove. Because the future is unknown, it is perceived as dangerous. Ambiguity is treated as a flaw that must be corrected, a void you need to fill, or a threat you must run away from as fast as possible. In this old framework, that magnetic tug toward an unseen destiny is dismissed as either harmless daydreaming, acceptable only if it doesn't distract you, or reckless irresponsibility the moment it threatens your practical life. Feeling internally divided is diagnosed as a sickness. It supposedly means you lack discipline, and you just need to pick a lane and commit. The heavy friction of living in superposition is framed as proof that you are failing at life. Furthermore, that deep craving for a different existence is categorized as either a childish delusion to be suppressed or a distant trophy you must bleed and sweat to earn. It isn't seen as something already real. In this old world, you are a solitary entity walking a single tightrope toward a future you either win or lose. All alternate choices and parallel roads are considered dead and gone. That is the world you are leaving behind. Now, let's peer across the threshold. On the new side of this doorway, reality is recognized as an expansive, breathing web. It is not a single thread, but a colossal, dynamic architecture where countless realities breathe, overlap, and communicate constantly. The future isn't some terrifying blank void. Instead, it is superposed. It is pregnant with a multitude of legitimate, tangible outcomes that already exist within the quantum fabric. Every one of these potential futures actively shapes your present moment through their constant intersection. The unknown is no longer a threat. It is the quantum fabric functioning at its absolute highest creative potential. It is the exact space where your active role in forging reality carries the most weight. Stepping past this threshold, feeling internally divided ceases to be an illness you must cure. It evolves into a heightened form of perception. It is the genuine capacity to recognize parallel timelines brushing up against your current world without letting them shatter your peace. This marks the dawn of an elevated awareness. You develop the bandwidth to sustain multiple possibilities at once without spiraling into chaos. You learn to stand firmly inside the superposition without frantically trying to force a conclusion. Across this boundary, that magnetic draw toward an unfulfilled destiny is no longer a mere daydream or an exhausting target. It becomes pure recognition. The environment is simply revealing what already holds true in potential form. It is the alternate path leaning heavily against your present reality, and your entire dynamic with it transforms. You stop desperately trying to manufacture this life through brute force. Instead, you undergo a genuine quantum phase transition, shedding the heavy defensive armor of your old self to reach a pure state of clarity. You tune your internal frequency so precisely that the walls separating your current existence from your destined future simply dissolve, allowing that new reality to flow right in. On this new horizon, you are no longer a solitary entity trudging along a straight, predictable line. You exist as a complex pattern of awareness within a vast matrix where parallel lives constantly intersect. You are the vital epicenter where these trajectories collide. That ultimate, authentic version of yourself, the one aggressively testing the limits of your current world, the one you felt as a nameless craving, is not hiding in some distant future. It is already here. It is actively bleeding into your timeline as we speak, and you are finally vibrating at the coherence required to welcome it. This is what waits just past the doorway. The persona that walks in is not the same one that steps out. Yet, this transition isn't a blind jump into the dark. It is simply acknowledging what has been real all along. The portal stands completely unlatched. Let's address the timing. Why is this happening right now? Your arrival at this exact precipice is absolutely not a random accident. And let me be scientifically precise about this. I am not relying on vague mysticism or asking for blind faith in the unprovable. I am speaking strictly in terms of established physics. The quantum field never broadcasts vital data arbitrarily. It transmits specific frequencies at the precise microsecond your awareness is primed to absorb them. Never early, never late. This principle is grounded in the hard mechanics of how information travels through the subatomic realm. The resonance between your mind and a specific vibration of the field directly dictates what parts of reality you are allowed to perceive at any given second. If you are unequipped to handle a certain level of truth, because your internal state lacks coherence with that frequency, that data remains relegated to the background static. Your biology actively censors it. The truth is present, but useless to you. Downloading that magnitude of reality prematurely wouldn't bring enlightenment. It would cause chaotic mental noise. But when you are truly prepared, when your personal evolution hits the breaking edge of your old paradigm, the biological filter lowers. The silent background suddenly sings. The wisdom that has permanently resided in the universe suddenly materializes in your view. The exact message you needed hits you flawlessly, because the perfect timing is simply the exact moment your consciousness achieved the capacity to listen. This is the undeniable reason you are watching this video, standing at this juncture, right now. It isn't because a supernatural universe is pulling invisible strings just for you. It is the basic physics of awareness interacting with reality. Profound insights only unlock when you hit the exact frequency necessary to download them. You find yourself here because, deep down, a part of you has already completed the crossing without your logical mind realizing it. Your deeper self already recognizes that your current life is a tiny fraction of the whole picture. You have reached the absolute limit of your previous existence and are towing the line of the next. That exhausting overlap, the fractured identity, the intense magnetic draw, none of it means you are broken. It proves the doorway is completely open, and it unlatches solely when you possess the exact resonance to step through, not a minute sooner, and for nobody else but you. This is the official point of transition. So, let us finally step across. I have a specific practice I want to guide you through next. This is not a conventional meditation. It isn't a breathing exercise designed to soothe your nerves or a cozy visualization to make your current life feel more pleasant. This is an active crossing technique. It is engineered to fundamentally alter the caliber of your perception during this exact phase of quantum superposition. The goal is to upgrade the energy you bring to the intersection of timelines, guaranteeing that the path which ultimately solidifies is the purest, most authentic expression of your soul. I need you to assume a posture that commands total presence. I am not asking you to get comfortable or relaxed. I am asking you to be intensely alert. This is the acute awareness of standing on the razor's edge of destiny, a state where you are completely awake because every single micro-movement matters. Draw in a breath that reaches deep into your core. Don't fake it. Take a genuine, anchoring breath that travels all the way down to the exact physical location where the stress of your fractured identity resides. You know exactly where that tension hides in your body. It varies from person to person, but you are intimately aware of its coordinates. Send your breath directly to that spot. Now, abandon all judgment. Cease all desperate attempts to fix the situation or rush toward an artificial conclusion. Simply allow yourself to physically feel both sides of the doorway at the exact same time. Acknowledge the part of you deeply entrenched in the old world, the one who navigates the fading system perfectly, the one who constructed an entire identity there. Allow yourself to feel that version of you with absolute clarity, not as garbage to be thrown out, but as a valid, historical truth. Honor it as the exact vessel that carried you safely to this precipice. Now, immediately pivot. Acknowledge the version of you that already thrives on the other side, the identity aggressively leaning against the glass of your current world, the one you experience as an intense craving for an unnameable future, the one operating on an entirely upgraded system, viewing the universe through a different lens, handling the unknown with mastery, and possessing a radically new understanding of itself. Allow yourself to feel that version with equal, piercing clarity. Both exist right now. Both are factually real. This overlap is not a psychological breakdown. It is literal quantum superposition. Both timelines are simultaneously active. Here is the secret to crossing over. Do not pick one. Do not attempt to violently collapse the superposition through sheer willpower. Stop trying to murder one identity to save the other. Instead, you must ask a completely different question. Stop asking, which version of myself is the correct one? Stop wondering, which path should I forcefully commit to? Instead, ask this: what is the universal field already revealing to me that my current vision is too clouded to see? Let that question sink in. Do not treat it as a demand for a snappy, logical answer. Treat it as a profound opening, a massive upgrade in the quality of your perception. Shift your energy away from desperately solving the puzzle and simply become still enough to let the universe broadcast what is already physically real. Hold that space. Watch what surfaces. Do not accept what you want to see. Do not accept what seems logical to your peers. Accept only what genuinely arrives. You must catch it before your inner critic edits it, before your biological filter kicks back in, and before your outdated mindset twists it into something safe. The very first thing that hits you before your logic butchers, it is always the absolute truth. It might manifest as a flash of imagery. It might hit you as a physical jolt in your stomach. It could be a solitary phrase, or a profound, wordless realization. It might even feel like a memory of a time you felt exponentially more alive than you do today. It could simply be a jarring recognition of a truth you've known your entire life, but were too blinded by your old habits to finally admit. Whatever it is, let it exist. Do not analyze it through your old operating system. Do not force it to logically defend itself. Do not demand that it makes sense to the outdated version of you currently clinging to the old reality. Just let the truth breathe. This is the crossing. This is the exact microsecond your perceptive abilities upgrade. This is the moment your mental barriers drop just enough for the quantum field to reflect its true nature back to you. The parallel timeline that was merely pushing against your reality is now, for a fleeting moment, visible. You are actively walking through the doorway as we speak. The identity that initiated this exercise is not the same identity concluding it. The portal is wide open, and you have stepped completely through it. Now, let's explore how the rules of the game change on this new side, because crossing this threshold isn't about arriving at a final stagnant destination. It is a fundamental rewiring of your relationship with existence. It is an entirely new framework that permanently dictates how you navigate reality from this second forward. The first major paradigm shift is how you process the unknown. In your old life, ambiguity was a terrifying gap between where you stood and where society told you to be. It was an emergency that needed immediate fixing. It was a condition to flee from, not a space to learn from. In that old framework, every bout of uncertainty was seen as proof of failure, a sign you lacked clarity and desperately needed to pick a side and commit. But here, on the other side of the doorway, uncertainty is the quantum field existing in pure, infinite superposition. This is the exact juncture where the quantum overlap becomes intensely visible. It is the peak state where your conscious involvement dictates which reality ultimately crystallizes. You aren't aggressively bullying an outcome into being. Rather, the pure quality of your presence acts as the catalyst for how the field collapses into the actual state. This completely revolutionizes your daily navigation. Any instance of true ambiguity when dual destinies appear equally viable and the horizon remains obscured is no longer an emergency. It transforms into a profound opening, not an opening to frantically guess the correct move, but a chance to achieve such deep stillness that the universe reveals the blueprint of what already exists. It is your opportunity to reach a state of absolute coherence with the timeline calling you, thinning the veil until the future seamlessly bleeds into your present. The second massive shift alters how you perceive that magnetic draw. In your old paradigm, craving an unmanifested life was dismissed as either fleeting inspiration or dangerous irresponsibility, a wild beast to tame or a grueling mountain to conquer. Across the threshold, however, that craving is pure recognition. It is the universe projecting a tangible potential. The alternate timeline is actively leaning against your reality, and your strategy completely flips. You cease forcing it to happen, and instead cultivate the coherence required to simply let it in. This is not lazy passivity. It is a highly active quantum phase transition. It is the rigorous process of shedding your defensive armor and stripping away the static between who you currently are and who you are destined to be. You become a flawless witness to reality, dissolving the wall between the possible and the actual. Thirdly, your dynamic with your unlived lives undergoes a radical overhaul. Previously, you assumed the roads not taken were dead and buried. Now, you grasp that those parallel existences aren't lingering in a faraway galaxy. They sprouted from the exact same superposition you did. Their energetic ripples directly impact your daily life, and you finally know how to translate them. That haunting nostalgia for a life you haven't lived, that is literally the alternate branch brushing against your current dimension. You no longer brush it off as fantasy. You recognize it as hard physics. Furthermore, your sudden disgust for logical decisions isn't self-sabotage. It is your nervous system receiving backdoor intel from the field, warning you that the timeline connected to that safe choice has already collapsed into a reality you fundamentally reject. You can finally rely on this instinct, not as magical thinking, but as pure, actionable data. Fourthly, your relationship with your fractured identity transforms. In the old world, feeling divided was a chaotic mess demanding an immediate cure. Here, possessing the bandwidth to sense the overlap between your performed past self and your authentic emerging self is an elite perceptual skill. It represents an evolution in consciousness. You can now sustain multiple coexisting realities without spiraling into panic. You can stand firmly in the intersection, decoding the field rather than sprinting blindly toward the exit. You are not damaged, you are not lost in the fog, and you aren't failing at life. You are simply a being whose awareness has tuned to a high enough frequency to touch destiny before it materializes. This is not a dilemma to be cured. It is the ultimate doorway, and you have successfully walked through it. A question for you, before we continue. I want to hear from those of you currently standing at this precipice. If you felt the heavy gravity of an alternate timeline but lacked the vocabulary to explain it, drop a comment below. What does the razor's edge feel like to you? What profound truth are you constantly swallowing down, afraid to say out loud? I read these, and I truly want to know. Now, we must address the broader implications of existing with this level of awareness during this specific era in human history, because this intense collision of timelines, the jarring division of your identity, and the heavy disorientation of living in superposition is not an isolated event. This is not just a personal crisis. We are navigating a massive, shared threshold. A macro-level phenomenon is unfolding across the universal field, causing these intense overlaps to surge globally. It's becoming impossible to ignore. Millions are suddenly sensing the fracture. Millions are standing before portals they never realized were there, tugged by timelines they can't quite visualize, and wrestling with the vertigo of inhabiting two identities at once without any map to guide them. This isn't a random glitch, and it certainly isn't a worldwide psychological breakdown. We have reached a collective tipping point. The entire quantum field is hovering in superposition on a planetary scale we haven't witnessed in ages. Dozens of divergent destinies for human civilization are actively coexisting as raw potential right now. The walls separating what is from what might be have never been more fragile. The timeline intersections are increasingly violent. The gravitational pull of parallel futures is immense. Your biological filter, the system working overtime to project a single, comforting reality, is straining under the pressure. And frequently, it's failing to keep the illusion intact. The individuals enduring the heaviest friction, the ones standing at the most dizzying crossroads, fighting the most extreme internal splits, and haunted by that nameless longing, are absolutely not losing their grip on reality. Quite the opposite. They are the highly attuned. Their awareness has simply calibrated to a pitch where the quantum bleed-through is unmistakable. Their biological static has cleared enough to hear the universe's baseline frequency, which brings us to you. Your presence here, absorbing this exact message at this specific second, is no accident. The field only dispatches data when an observer possesses the exact resonance to decode it. You are not falling behind. You aren't wandering blindly, and you haven't failed. You are standing squarely at the doorway, which is exactly where you belong. I want to plant a final question in your mind. This isn't a puzzle to forcefully solve or a homework assignment to complete. Treat it as a wide-open lens. If you sit with it using pure awareness, it will unravel within you long after this video fades to black. Here it is. What is the exact parallel timeline violently pushing against your current world? I don't mean the life society demands of you, not the path that looks impressive on paper, and not the one that appeases your outdated ego. I am talking about the destiny that surfaces the second you drop the act, the life that feels like an ancient memory rather than a shiny new goal, the reality that continuously haunts your periphery in profound dreams that feel heavier than waking life, in silent moments when your mental defenses drop, and in that relentless, undeniable magnetism you can neither explain nor ignore. That life is not trapped in a daydream. It is not a fragile wish relying on perfect luck to materialize. It is a concrete reality currently vibrating in the field. It is actively intersecting with your timeline today. It has been breathing down the neck of your current existence since you were born. You just didn't have the dictionary to translate it. But today, you do. The portal is completely unlatched, and waiting on the other side is the self you have eternally been. The authentic identity the universe has been desperately trying to reveal to you through every bout of superposition, every irrational craving, and every fleeting sense of déjà vu. The issue is no longer whether this alternate you exists. It does. The issue isn't whether the doorway is real. It is. The only variable left is whether you possess the courage to walk through. You have crossed the threshold. But we must discuss what happens in the immediate aftermath, the days and weeks following your transition, because the portal doesn't instantly slam shut the second you step across. In the tangible human world, Shifting between dimensional states is not an overnight miracle. Quantum decoherence requires a runway. Your previous existence doesn't evaporate into thin air the millisecond the new one anchors. You will experience an integration phase, sometimes fleeting, sometimes grueling, where both realities are actively breathing. Both your obsolete mindset and your upgraded paradigm will operate simultaneously. The version of you that walked up to the gate and the version of you born on the other side will momentarily share the same space, both fighting for dominance over your actions. Enduring this messy overlap does not mean you failed the crossing. It is not proof that you somehow slipped backward through the portal. It is completely real. The issue was never whether you would eventually locate it, you did. The debate was never about your competence to navigate it, you are perfectly capable. The sole remaining variable is this: will you actually take the step? Deep down, your soul has already answered. You actually initiated the crossing the exact second you dared to ask what the quantum field was projecting just beyond your blind spots. You stepped over the line the moment you allowed two contradictory identities to coexist within you, without frantically trying to assassinate one of them. You transitioned when you stopped dismissing your unlived destiny as a childish fairy tale, and instead respected it as the undeniable gravity of your future self colliding with your present. You made the leap the instant you abandoned the urge to medicate your discomfort and finally chose to decode it. The transition is already complete, and a retreat is physically impossible. This isn't because your past was magically erased, but because your vision has cleared enough to perceive it accurately. You recognize your old life for what it truly is: just one fragile branch on an infinite tree, merely a single evolving state trapped in a massive superposition. It was simply one iteration of a mind, slowly awakening to its ultimate form. You are fundamentally altered from the person who clicked play on this video. That isn't poetic flair. It is the brutal, mechanical reality of crossing a quantum threshold. The persona that walked in is gone. A highly upgraded entity is walking out. And this new version possesses a truth the old one lacked, not as memorized trivia, but as cellular, lived reality. This elevated frequency will continue to burn within you, unraveling new truths and gradually illuminating the next portal when your time arrives. That agonizing internal friction you suffered was never a sickness. It was pure physics. It was the universe presenting your ultimate potential and challenging you to hold enough presence to claim it. And you did. You always possessed the bandwidth. The doorway is wide open, and you have officially crossed the threshold. Welcome to the other side. Right now, drop down to the comments and leave a single sentence. Do not filter it. Give me the raw data that hits your brain before your ego has time to sanitize it. Let it stream directly from the identity that just conquered the portal. What is the exact alternate reality aggressively pushing against the walls of your current life? One raw sentence, unedited. The very first instinct that hits you. Because those who possess the courage to type that unfiltered truth are the ones actively standing on the new side of the boundary. They are vibrating in perfect sync with the timeline crashing into them, actively manifesting into the masters they were always designed to be. I want to witness how many viewers possess the absolute clarity to give this overlap a name. Put it in writing. Let it exist. Do not apologize for it. Do not defend it. And do not try to make it sound logical to your obsolete past self. Just release it into the wild. The portal is unlatched. The universe is taking notes. And so am I. Before this broadcast concludes, I want to plant one final seed in your mind. It isn't a heavy philosophy or a strict set of rules. It is a single question designed to echo within you, keeping the doorway wedged open, not forcing you to sprint through in a panic, but ensuring the passage remains clear the exact second you are prepared. Here is the question. If that alternate destiny leaning so heavily against your present world were an established fact, if it were actively playing out in a parallel branch intersecting with your life right now, what exact action would you change in this very moment? Not someday. Not when your bank account is full, the conditions are flawless, or you've engineered the perfect master plan. Right here, right now. How would the intensity of your focus shift? Where would you direct your daily decisions? How would you tolerate the chaotic unknown? How would your dynamic with that invisible magnetic pull completely transform? How would you operate if you possessed absolute certainty? Not blind hope or cute optimism, but the concrete, unshakable knowing backed by the hard science of quantum intersection, the profound realization that the existence you crave isn't hiding in a distant galaxy. It is right here. It is fiercely pushing against the glass of your reality today, just as it has for years. The gap separating you from that timeline isn't calculated in months, sweat, or the perfect alignment of luck. It is measured entirely by the purity of your perception. It is determined by the absolute clarity you hold at the precipice, your fierce refusal to censor the universe's signals, and your raw bravery to let the unfiltered truth bleed into existence. The portal is unlatched. It was never locked to begin with. You are physically standing on the threshold right now, and the only inquiry that holds any weight at a boundary like this is the one you are currently proving. Will you cross? You already did. There is no going back from here. If this broadcast reached you precisely at your critical junction, then my next transmission titled, "Once You Cross This Decision Point," the version of you that was hiding collapses will pick up the exact moment this video fades. It will meet you right at the edge where your dead identity finally lets go, and the dormant truth of the quantum field solidifies permanently into your physical life.